Next question is for Councilman Liu. Councilman Liu, you've said you would be an activist shareholder and use the role of large institutional investor to promote change in corporate policies. How would you decide between divestment and advocacy for change for those companies whose policies you disapprove of? And how would you reconcile the goal of maximizing profits and promoting socially responsible behavior when they conflict?
That's a very good question. In the case of corporations where New York City pension funds are a major shareholder in many of the big global companies, and certainly because of the way the proxies work, even if you're not a majority shareholder, obviously you have an outsized, disproportionate impact on corporate governance. And so I have said, and I certainly will use as Comptroller, the full shareholder activism powers vested in the Comptroller's office by virtue of the nearly $100 billion of pension fund dollars. In companies where we might be able to use proxies and voting to change some of the corporate practices, for example, outlandish, outrageous executive compensation schemes and outdated human resources practices, those are areas where I would use shareholder activism to try to change some of the corporate policies in place. In areas where the companies are, for example, dealing with regimes that abuse human rights, and it would be very difficult to change that corporation's practices through the shareholder, the proxy process. And those are examples where I would simply divest pension funds. And this is all reconcilable with the fiduciary responsibility of the Comptroller, because in our capital markets today, there are so many investment choices that I can't think of any particular investment that, for example, has to do with Iran that does not have a similar risk-reward profile in some other investment.
Thank you. Mr. Yaski.
Well, there's a couple of different things going on, I think, in your question. And I don't know I have a principled, or a theoretical answer to when divest opposed to when work for change. Example. Companies do business in Iran or Sudan, for that matter. There, I think divestment is the way that, together with other investors across the country or the globe, you can maybe have an impact not on the company, but you're looking to have an impact on the regime, Iran or Sudan. So I think divestment is necessary there to achieve that goal. Where you're trying to get a company to pollute less or pursue more environmental technologies, there you want to work from within. And all right, we're out of time, but I hope you'll give us more time to talk about corporate governance.
You will get that time. Mr. Wepper.
Yeah, I think there is room for shareholder activism without compromising your fiduciary obligation to preserve assets and get the best return on the pension fund. In the case of divesting, I think the precedent has been with apartheid in South Africa. I've said publicly that I support divesting of companies that have major holdings in both Iran and Sudan. And I think if you looked at, and it's very hard to determine what the end result would be as far as those companies, but looking back on the apartheid in South Africa, I think the pension funds that divested of those companies ended up doing better statistically than the ones that didn't. So, it's kind of hard to say, but I think you just have to do what you feel is responsible.
Thank you. Ms. Katz.
Well, first of all, under my administration, there wouldn't be a conflict between getting a return and using the pensions for social activism, because if there's no return on the money, then there's no investment. But at the same time, one doesn't preclude the other. Statistic upon statistic has showed that you can get a great return on the money when there are companies that you use social activism with. For instance, I testified at the SEC to make it easier for shareholders to have an active role in picking the board of directors. Why? Because every Ernst & Young, Goldman Sachs reports all show that when there is social activism by the shareholders and an active role in it, that a company actually remains more profitable. But you have to have a return on the money before you even think about social values.